Welcome to Quills and Chills. I'm your host, Rick Clifton, and I'm going to introduce you to the creators who give fear its voice. Together, we'll explore the strange, the unsettling, and the unforgettable. So go ahead and dim those lights because that conversation starts now. Hello and welcome back to Quills and Chills. I'm your host, Rick Clifton. Today I'm joined by Dana Mele, author of People Like Us, which was shortlisted for the ITW Thriller Award and Summer's Edge, a Barnes & Noble Young Adult Book Club selection. But today, Dana is here to talk to me about their latest novel, The Beast You Let In, which is so great. So welcome to the show, Dana.
Thanks.
So I'm going to start with the hardest question of the day, and that is for you to just sort of tell our listeners that are coming into this fresh what the book is about.
And I always fail that question, but I'll do my best. So it's about two siblings, twins that live in a small upstate New York kind of mountain town that discover that, well, they don't discover, it's kind of a local legend in their town that a teen died there about 20, 30 years ago. It's kind of, like I said, snowballed into a little bit of a local legend. It did happen, but it's, you know, how sometimes things that happens take on a mythology of their own. And one of them becomes sort of drawn into an investigation of what really happened. Then the night of the anniversary of this death, one of the twins goes missing, and the other one makes it her mission to find the missing sibling. But when they turn up later, I'll start using names. Beth disappears, turns up later. It claims to be Veronica Green is the name of the teen who was murdered. And then Hazel, the investigating sibling, has to find out whether Beth is lying or actually is possessed by the spirit of Veronica Green. And there's tension between the twins from the very first page. So you have to find out, you know, what's really going on along with Hazel, and there are some twists and turns, of course, and it gets spooky.
I love the concept. I think it's really great. I love the twists and turns. Every time I turn around, I'm like, oh, wow. Oh, okay. And I like to pride myself in that I can see a twist coming like from 30 clicks, and you got me. So
Oh, thanks.
it's really great. So I do want to talk a little bit about Hazel and Beth, if we can. They're twins, as you mentioned. And so this question could go into spoiler territory. I don't want to do that. I know the book is out right now, but still, let's try to be, I guess, spoiler free as much as we can. But by the start of the story, they're already there's some resentment between them. There's some distance. There's some definitely some imbalance between their relationship. And I know that this is somewhat revealed throughout the story, but I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about what happened in this relationship before the night of the party that makes Hazel so conflicted about and with her sister. As much as we can, spoiler free.
Yeah, that is a little difficult to talk about without any spoilers because you're sort of meant to go into the story not really knowing the full picture. So I like to kind of structure. I think I got into this with my second book, Summer's Edge, where I kind of discovered how fun it is to write something starting with one character's point of view. I've structured both of these stories this way, and now I can't stop doing it, where you start with one POV. And it's a multiple POV book that doesn't alternate chapters. So it doesn't go like Beth's POV, and then the next chapter is Hazel's POV and back and forth. The whole first act is Hazel's POV. And so we get one side of the story, and then it stops. This actually is kind of giving it away a little bit because you don't know that it's going to happen. But so we get Hazel's entire perspective inside of things, and she's just like, my sister's a liar, and you know, she's a terrible person, and she did all these terrible things to me. And then all of a sudden we're not in Hazel's point of view anymore, and we hear every bad thing that happened from another point of view, and it might make you question, wait a second, is all this stuff really true? And like I said, my book right before this, Summer's Edge, does the same thing. It tells 3 summers from 3 different perspectives, and by the end I'm hoping people are like, what So with this, the same thing happens. And so I don't want to tell exactly what happened, because it really is, I think the emotional heart of the story is saying like, oh, we think this person is a bad person, Beth specifically, and everything she's done kind of justifies Hazel's lens of the story. And then you find out maybe she did a couple bad things that, or not bad, but they're siblings and they have some clashes. Each of them did some things to the other along the way. And also it's not really, I don't think that it's all on them. I think that their environment and their family and their town forced them into a adversarial position towards each other. Again, I know I'm talking in such vague language, but basically
I'm going to do the same thing with you this whole interview, because there's so much I love from the back half that I'm like, oh gosh, I can't really say. So
but I can say that, they have opposite personalities. Beth is kind of the outgoing, popular one a little bit. Hazel is kind of like the more like shy, reticent one, who she's also neurodivergent, and she doesn't like necessarily pick up on all the same social cues that Beth does. And their mom has forced them into a position where they kind of always have to hang out, even though they wouldn't naturally necessarily be friends if they weren't siblings. So that kind of puts them into a little bit of a, like I said, like a natural, just like a clashing, not adversarial, but a clashing position as they're growing up. And so maybe when, your kids, I don't know if this is true for everyone, but you're kind of just like forced to be friends with your siblings a little bit. My brother and I are now friends, but like when we were little, I don't know that we would have been friends if we weren't forced to hang out and stuff. Maybe there's a little bit of like, I just drew a little bit from my childhood, but my brother and I don't hate each other. They might hate each other, Beth and Hazel, at some point. So that kind of starts the clash. But then, they do run into some specific incidents that are described in the book that set them up to really hash it out with each other. What I won't describe is the main conflict that they have, because I think it is, again, it's it's a reveal. I'll put it that way. It's a reveal. Exactly. So I don't want to talk about a reveal.
Exactly. It's kind of a pivotal moment, I think. So at least I thought it was for me. So I want to talk a little bit about Hazel then. I think for me, it felt like Hazel seems to move through the world with this sort of a pretty firm sense of like who people are and what motivates them. And, especially when it comes to her sister Beth. Now, how does Beth's return begin challenging those assumptions? Again, I know I think we could talk a little bit about it, because it does kind of start fairly early on. But I was wondering how that maybe challenges some of Hazel's assumptions and forcing her to sort of see the people around her differently.
Beth's return from being missing, or Beth's point of view? Oh,
Beth's return from being missing.
For one thing, it's not necessarily right at Beth's return from being missing, but Beth's going missing in the first time. For one thing, it forces Hazel to step out of her comfort zone and spend time with people that Hazel never would choose to do. So Hazel then has to get to know people that Beth has chosen to surround themselves with, but Hazel has a very negative view of. So, Beth's best friend, newcomers to the town, and they both have been kind of raised to be very suspicious of people who were not born in this tiny little town. It's kind of this culture of, it's insular. It's very like, we are the people that we can trust in this little town. You can't trust tourists. You can't trust outsiders. And it's something that Beth has learned to be very skeptical of and to question and to be like, this is a very toxic view, but Hazel hasn't yet. So Hazel has believed this and begun to question it a little bit, but not very seriously. And so she is a little bit skeptical of these new people that have come to town, these people that just come in and use their land and use their resources and don't treat it very nicely. So she's kind of bought into the things that her family has told her for years, and the town just believes. And, I'm not from, but I lived in a town like this for many, 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 many years. So I kind of, am very familiar with this kind of way of thinking, and I see a little bit of the both sides. There is some truth to it, and there's also some truth to the fact that this is a very mean way of thinking. And it's just not very nuanced. I'll put it that way. It's not very nuanced, and there's a very toxic, it's rooted in some very bad ways of thinking and it conceals a more insidious mindset that's rooted in prejudice and bigotry. That's sort of what I tried to explore a little bit here, along with many other things. So while Beth sees that, Hazel doesn't get it quite yet. And so she has to spend time with Beth's new friends and with Beth's old friends as well. And so she gets to spend time with some of the people that she has made assumptions about. And some of those assumptions are that people that would not naturally be her allies actually are her allies. And so once she gets to know these people, she's like, oh, actually, we have some things in common, some really important things in common. And the people who I should trust maybe are not the people I should be trusting. And the people that I should be trusting, the people that will have my back and will stand up for me, are the people that I'm slowly now getting to know. And, that's where eventually her found family comes from by the end of the story.
I love it. And I love that you were talking about the town, because that's a perfect segue for my next question. I do want to talk a little bit about the town. Ashling, it kind of feels like a kind of town where everybody knows everybody else's business, right? And yet there are some very important truths that kind of stay hidden in this town. I'm going to talk a little in code here. So let's talk. I would love to talk about how the events that happen, the night of Veronica Green's death, I guess, if you will, not the night of her death, but the night of where the story starts, right? How does that start exposing the cracks in the stories with the people that have been sort of keeping this hidden for so long? Again, I'm being coded. I'm sorry, but
you mean
I don't want to give stuff away, but it's so good.
The night of the anniversary of Veronica's death, you mean? Oh, the night of the party?
Night of the party.
How does that first start to show the cracks? That's interesting. I have to think about it for a second and refresh my memory because I wrote it a while ago. Let's see. So Beth disappears. I don't know if I can answer that right away. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Let me see if I can phrase it a different way for you. So I think it pretty much starts the next morning when Hazel goes to meet with Ezra. And then she thinks she's walking into one situation, and it turns out that it's actually something quite different. I think Ezra's response to her was something that she wasn't expecting. And then it just leads them into this sort of journey, this investigation that they're in, and they start uncovering all these hidden truths and stuff. So for me, I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about sort of what that discovery was all about for them.
Sure. Well, I think the first cracks, I guess, begin to appear probably the next day. Like you say, she has very set ideas about who these people are without knowing them too well. So I think Ezra would probably be the first person that she starts to second guess herself about. She has this idea that because of the way people treat Ezra is a certain person. And so she thinks, she goes to the police first, right? Not because she wants to, but because her parents are there. And she is so sure that Ezra has something to do with Beth's disappearance because of a conflict that happens between Ezra is, first of all, Beth's ex. They have a fight right before Beth disappears. And she's like, Ezra is going to be they're not going to investigate Ezra. And she's right. She goes to the police. She's like, this is the town golden boy. They're not going to even look at him. And she goes to the police, and they pretty much confirm her suspicions. They're like, we're going to look at this new kid in town, Jack, who we just think he's different. And so she says, well, I'm going to take matters in my own hands. She goes to Ezra, and he doesn't act the way that she suspects. First of all, he's concerned. He says, I'm going to clear my own name. And she is a little bit taken aback by that. He wants, he is a little bit defensive and doofy and, a little bit more, he definitely doesn't seem as confident as she would suspect, first of all, but he's concerned about Beth, and he also wants to be believed. He cares what Hazel thinks about him. He cares what everyone thinks about him. And he, more than anything, he is worried about Beth. He's very protective, and he's very just genuine, I think, in a way that takes Hazel so aback, because she thinks that he's this guy who thinks he's Teflon, and he's very much the opposite of that.
That's so I think that is too. It surprised me. I was like, oh, all right.
Yeah. And I think that's the first thing that throws her off, is that there's vulnerability in each of the characters that she expects to find none.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I think it was that way with each of the characters we meet. I just felt like I had a certain, oh, I know this person. And then as you get to know them, you're like, well, I guess that's true in real life too. Like, they're not always exactly what you might think that they are from the outside. But you hit on something else too, especially when Hazel's at the police station very early on. And it's one of the things I think that as I finished the book, I kind of started thinking about it. I was like, it just one of the things that kind of sat with me the most was what was most unsettling is not so much, that all the supernatural elements around Veronica Green and all of that, but from the way the adults just seem to repeatedly fail the young people around them. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how that failure shapes the world that Hazel has grown up in.
Yeah. So that's something that, I think is, let me just think about that for a beat.
No worries.
It's a huge thing in the book. Sort of they talk about the way that I refer to it. I just realized this sweater I'm wearing unintentionally. They refer to like some of these classic movies, these horror movies, and they talk about like the Freddy Krueger effect in this sort of generational. It's a theme in a lot of horror movies and stories and stuff where the kids kind of get punished for the things that the parents do. And I took that kind of like horror tradition or whatever to talk about something that I think is really serious in real life, which is that like when adults don't protect kids and prepare kids, really bad things happen. And so in this case, like the adults have majorly failed the kids in every single set of I think every single character that's true, even the minor characters. And for some of the minor characters, it's only mentioned very briefly. Like even so Phoebe is a minor character, but it's mentioned how her parents' divorce has really left her alone. And I think I did very intentionally mention that for every single character, but it's very brief for some of them because that is something that really, really is important to me to acknowledge. Right now, kids are really majorly being hurt by the decisions of adults in the world, for queer kids very especially, whether it's for the way trans kids are getting completely thrown under the bus, book bans, school boards are doing what they want and completely not protecting children. So this is just like a little sort of micro way of addressing it in this book. But yeah, so within the family for Hazel and Beth, that's the biggest way this happens, even though the whole town is doing it to all of the kids in this town. Even the bad guys it affects, though. I won't go into that too much because I guess you have to read it. It's too spoilery. But it's for Hazel and Beth. I kind of referred earlier to the fact that they've been sort of like brainwashed and like fed this certain sort of like ethos of this town, which is very toxic and very poisonous. And that sets them all up for failure, like as they grow and their classmates are trained to be against them. Hazel goes through a transformation from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, where in the beginning, she's hostile towards her own allies and she doesn't even really understand it until she gets to know them. And so I kind of talked about that a little bit in the beginning, but they don't understand that their families are doing this to them. And Hazel is being very much victimized by her own parents. And she doesn't know that what she's angry at Beth for is Beth trying to protect her. So you asked about the major conflict between them. And I kind of was like, oh, that's too much of a reveal for me to talk about in detail. But that really is what it is that Beth makes a really heartbreaking decision in something that is explored in a flashback, but it's because she's trying to protect Hazel from something that would be incredibly devastating if she had to go through. I'm sorry I'm talking about it in such cryptic terms, but that's really what it is the parents abandoning their children. And it's such a horrible thing. I hate to even write about it. I was doing another, sorry, this is a little bit of a side thing, but I did another in my book release. Someone was interviewing me about this and kind of said, you did not shy away. You talked about like really terrible things that kids are going through. And usually when you write these, like, I call them popcorn books. I think she called it like fast food books or something. And usually we don't touch on the tougher subjects. And it's usually that there are two different kinds of books. There are like the fast food or the popcorn books, where kids have these like big adventures and it's like either horror or thriller or romance or whatever, but they're the popcorn books. Or you explore the serious issues. And I know a lot of people sometimes are a little bit head scratchy about, well, why did you mention really serious things in this? And for me, the answer is, I just asked my own question instead of just answering yours. But the reason why is because I don't think it's possible to completely ignore what is happening right now. And so thanks. It's a little bit risky. It's a huge risk, but I don't think it's possible. And so I think that you do kind of have to acknowledge it. But for this book, I chose to not just acknowledge it, but to make that the whole story, is to write the horror, because what's happening right now is the horror. So that is the horror.
Well, I'm glad that I feel like you've seen my questions in advance, because you are segueing right into everything I want to talk about. So it's so great. I'm glad you brought this up, though, because I did sort of want to transition and talk about that a little bit. And first we'll kind of sort of talk about it in terms of Hazel and the character. And then I want to talk about it from, I guess, a little more of a philosophical sort of aspect as well. But as Hazel gets into the mystery and more into the story, she keeps you already established she's encountering these people who are in some form or another asking her to hide parts of who Hazel is in order to belong or order to be safe in this town and in this environment. And I'd love to talk about, just from a story aspect, how that tension begins to influence the way that she understands her own identity.
Yeah, so she is pretty much explicitly asked that. Her parents ask her these coded questions, and that was something that I tried to navigate really carefully and explicitly too. Growing up I'm old. I'm 46. So I grew up in the 90s.
Dana, I'm older than you.
Oh, okay.
So we're good. Trust me.
Writing YA, I'm old. But maybe if you grew up in the same time period, maybe you remember this, but this was really the way it was back then. Maybe it wasn't for a handful of people, but it was like, it was expected to, like, those dialogues and those conversations happened a lot. It was just kind of like, your parents maybe knew that you were queer, but they would still all the time be like, did you meet any boys? And you'd be like, what are you talking about? So there would be a lot of different coded ways that people would interact that would be trying to, what's the opposite of affirm? Like, there's a word, I'm a writer, I should know it, but I don't. The opposite of it would be trying to rewrite who you are and like deprogram, I guess, who you are from people who know very well, but people would try to like take who you are and change it through these coded conversations, because they would also try to not acknowledge. And so without acknowledging, nudge things and change things. And it's uncomfortable, and it's also really insulting, and it's damaging. It's psychologically damaging. And so, like, everyone knows the explicit damage, that explicit, like, yeah, some parents and family members and things will do the explicit damage of, being like, I'm sending you to a therapist and we're going to do this really explicit thing. But there's also this other layer that would always happen, which was the non-explicit, trying to, I guess it's just a passive aggressive, subtle, it's a coded way of doing the same thing. And I hope that a lot of people will recognize this, because I know it's super common, and I know that it chips away in a certain way. It just like chips away at your self-image, your self-confidence, your sense of self, because I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this, but I know that it's a thing. Because I know so many people, we've lived through it, and just over time that it just chips away at you. And so that's what's happening to Hazel. And she's kind of slowly recognizing that it's happening. And that's why she's at the beginning, it's a little bit before the beginning of the book. She's saying, I need to come out to my family because I need this to stop, because it's hurting me. And so that's where she is. And she's also saying, and so I guess I am kind of getting a little bit into spoiler territory. It's when she says this to Beth, and Beth actually kind of is like, I don't know. And that's when there's a little bit of there's hurt that happens when that happens. So yeah, I think there is a really tough, it's not a conversation, but there's a really tough situation for a lot of people who do live in an unsafe environment, where it's like, it's not safe to come out. It's also not safe or healthy to not come out. And that a lot of people are forced into that situation. And the book talks about one of those, a situation just in one small house for two siblings, and how they handle it differently, because they do decide to handle it differently while not talking to each other and not knowing that they're both in the same situation.
I love this, actually, and I think this I think you've already answered the next part of my question, which I think is more the philosophical one, but it's one of the things that you were just saying is what strikes me is how often the real danger comes from, I guess, this pressure to conform to what people want you to be, and constantly being told who you're allowed to be, especially by parents and religious figures and who that might be, and what parts of themselves that they should hide. And I was wondering if, again, I think you've already done this, but if we could talk a little bit about how communities are a little more frightened by difference than by the harm caused in the name of conformity.
Yeah, sure. And again, this feels even more relevant than when I started writing this a few years ago. I started writing actually during COVID, and it's so scary how it actually got more and more and more relevant, not relevant, but I don't know what the right word, more dangerous as I was editing it over the years. And now, even after it's published, it just seems like it keeps getting to be more of a problem. Certainly, if you live in certain places, it's worse than if you live in other places. But I did write this, and I said it in a red dot in a blue state, because I actually did want to, I think a lot of times people don't realize, like, it's like, oh, if you live in New York, you're safe. It's like, no, you're not. It really just varies on local.
What part? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm in Los Angeles, which is considered fairly safe, but you go outside the city limits of Los Angeles, just 20 miles in either direction, south or even west or slightly north, it's not as safe. So
it's not. You drive over up into a mountain, like I said this in like a little mountain town or something, but they're very insular. Your school board, a lot of times, if you're a kid, like, your school board decides how safe you are. Or like if you are an adult and you work, I guess sorry, I get a little bit stuttery sometimes. Your work culture,
you're in
like
good company.
HR or the hiring board decides how safe you are. A lot of times, I think a lot of times we tend to think more on a macro level, but it's like who immediately surrounds you, really, that decides how safe you are a lot of times, because that's who is going to be either, I always want to be careful, like, the exact words I say, but like, either protecting you or harming you, really, are the people who are surrounding you every day. So I talk about in the book, some of the specific things, obviously, that can happen, but I don't want to, I always want to be careful not to be too scary. So, but yeah, it is like a pretty individualized thing and a pretty localized situation, I think. I'm sorry if I got a little bit off track. I may have just then.
No. You're this is great. This is exactly the conversation I want to have. And my next question is, so it's a question I ask everybody. It's like, without giving too much away, what moment or sequence in the book are you most excited for readers to experience? Before you answer that, though, I'm going to go a little outside the norm for me, because I usually always like to give something that was a big moment for me, and I will do that. But the one that I love, the part of this book that I love the absolute most, is the dedication that you had in the very front of it. I got to tell you, it still makes me tear up a little bit. It's really great. So.
Oh, thank you so much. It means a lot to me too. And also the author note at the end.
Yep.
I feel like not a lot of people read. So yeah, that does mean a lot to me. So thank you. That means a lot to me. So, and I hope people do read it, and I hope people speak up, because we need it. a lot.
No, I thought it was fantastic. I don't want to mention it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Now I'll give you a story one. And it's the very, very, very end of the book, basically the last line. And I was screaming. I was like, yes! And I hope that means what I think it means, but we'll save that for my follow-up question.
Ooh, because I was like, how did I end up eating that? Oh, yeah.
I loved it. So that last line's really great.
Thank you. I'll share something about that, actually, just like as a little fun fact. So I always change my endings, and I did this with my first book too. I usually write a nice ending and then I change it to a mean ending.
Yay.
So I did originally have a nicer ending, and I don't think this is spoiling too much, except to say that it's a more forceful ending or bolder ending. Is that like I usually first write an ending where everything is just like, and they all lived happily ever after. And usually my editors will just be like, what? And I'll be like, I feel like it's for teens and they need like a little bit more maybe reassurance, because I just wrote a bunch of people dying. And they're just like, but I don't like it. And I'll like be like, oh, okay, then you asked for it. And I'll write something that's more fun. I think like if I had a little more self-confidence, I would always originally write it's not mean exactly, but it's more fun. It's definitely from the heart, but you get a little scared, I think, always to write. I don't know if all writers feel this way, but I think you get a little scared to write what you would write if you didn't have any worries about how it would be received. But I'm glad that you did like that ending. So
no, I loved it. It's great.
Good.
And I guess that's my last question for you is like, what does that mean for this story and this character? Will we be returning to these characters again?
No, I'm not allowed to do that.
Dana!
It would be really fun. But I think what that allows you to do as the reader is to imagine like however you would like that to go with it. I don't think that gives anything away, is to say that there's no way, I think, to repeat that. I don't think you could really return. For me, there's no way for me to keep going back and writing that without it feeling repetitive. But certainly there'd be no more, I don't know, as a challenge. Yeah. But certainly Source Books has not invited me to. So, but it would be fun.
Well, I will say this. One of my favorite things about like horror that I've always loved is whenever we revisit characters much later in their life that had these traumatic experiences, and I love seeing how that changed the trajectory of their life. And one of the probably not the best example, but if you look at like the Halloween movies, and especially the latest ones with Jamie Lee Curtis and the latest trilogy that they did, seeing her character Laurie Strode all these years later and how that trauma at 17 impacted her life, and not only her life, but her daughter's life and her granddaughter's life. To me, that just was like that's the kind of stuff that I love when it comes to storytelling, is so what the like revisiting those characters, but at a much later time. And that was probably my favorite aspect of the Halloween movies. I don't know that they were everybody's most favorite version of the Halloween franchise, but I really loved seeing those characters again in that way and in that light. So
yeah, no, I love that too. And now that you said it, I'm like, oh, that would be really fun. But no, that is really cool. I also do love just, I talked about how like one generation affects the next and all of that stuff. And certainly there is a lot of really interesting stuff in here. Like, well, what does happen next, But, it's interesting because I'll just like throw it out there. My next book actually is, again, kind of about, it's not about the same stories, but it is about how it's about a generational curse. I'll just say that much. So it may not be about these same characters, but it does explore that theme. There will be something, it's a spiritual successor maybe in a little way. So we will be getting like a little bit more of that.
Oh, I love that. I'm like, you see me lean forward. I'm like, oh, I love a generational curse. I'm
Yes.
in. I'm in. Dana, thank you so much for your time today. The book is The Beast You Let In. It is available everywhere now. As we always like to say here at Quills and Chills, please support your local bookstores whenever and wherever possible. Dana, how can our audiences find you online and on social?
I'm on Instagram. Dana M Mele is my handle, and don't look for me on Threads because I don't talk about books. I only yell about political stuff, and you'll just get angry along with me or at me. But I am there.
I think I may have to go and find you on Threads because I think I would enjoy that conversation, honestly. All right. Well, again, I thank you for your time, and I love the book. And yeah, I'll get all that information up on screen for the video version, and I'll make sure it's in the show notes as well. So, and when this is out, I will get you tagged in all the socials.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. All right, guys, we'll see you next time on Quills and Chills. Bye.
Bye.